Okay. Let me make sure it's recording. Okay. All right. So welcome everyone. It looks like we are recording now. So I'm so excited for you to join me here today. It is March 11th, 2019, and we're talking about what it takes to become an author. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Jamie Flares. I'm a book coach. I help people write books. I'm a developmental editor, meaning I help people with the big picture ideas and the structure and the organization and the style and all of those things, all the big things when it comes to writing books. I've written my own book called Birth Your Story, and I've also been a professional writer for 15 years. My job right now and my passion is to help coaches and healers, artists and entrepreneurs write the nonfiction and memoir books that they were born to write. I'm so excited to be with you today. The reason I put this class together is because I want to share with you some of the key traits and behaviors I've seen in the successful authors I've worked with over the years. But more than that, I really would love to help you explore whether or not you're ready to commit to a book project and give you the insight around what it will take to be successful. Furthermore, I'd love to say right now at the outset that if you're on this call, it's a good chance you have exactly what you need to write your book, but you just need support to help clear the blocks and give you the confidence and the tools that you need to say a full yes. So let's just talk a little bit about becoming an author. So something like 80% or more of American adults say they want to write a book, but only 0.004% ever actually do. So this is a very small percentage. And what's up with this? You know, many people have the desire to write a book, but they don't know what it actually takes to make that dream a reality. Oftentimes they lack the knowledge, the skills, the mindset, and the support that they need in order to continue. And that is exactly what I'm here to share with you today. I'm going to break down what it takes to become an author. On this call, you'll hear 10 things that every successful author needs in order to write a book, and also 3 things that often people think they need in order to write, but they actually don't. So I'd love to share with you too, once again, that becoming a successful author is totally possible for you. In addition to sharing all this information with you today, I will just talk to you briefly at the end of the call about my work. So I have a program called Birth Your Book, and you'll hear why I tend to use birth metaphors, and my book is about birth. So you'll hear me talk about birth. I'm a former birth doula. And so I'll be talking to you a little bit about my private coaching and also my group coaching at the end of the call in case you're interested. I'd love to hear if you want to engage in the chat, where you're calling from and what brought you to this webinar. And then once again, just know that at any point you are welcome to ask any questions, share any thoughts that you have throughout. And I'll either get to the questions as they come in or at a good pause. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into these 10 essentials that all authors need in order to succeed. So the first one is having the courage to start. And honestly, I include this one because it is one of the biggest places of resistance and blocks for so many would-be writers. These are the I'm gonna write a book someday people. And I don't know if you're one of those or if you can relate or if you've heard that, but there are a lot of people out there who say, someday I will write a book. You know, they have a book dream and maybe they've mentioned, there's someone else joining. Let me just add. Okay, great. Welcome. Okay, so they have a book dream and they've mentioned it to others. Maybe sometimes others have actually been begging us to write our books. And maybe we've even toyed with writing some things down. But often that's where we can stay. And with most people, they stay right here. With a huge majority, most of that 80%, never passing go and never collecting that proverbial $200, which is really the payoff for committing to the epic adventure that is going all the way around life's game board. It is so easy and so safe to stay in your book vision and never have the courage to actually start. The starting line of any major project or soul-led mission can be the scariest place. And I'm curious if you can relate to that. You know, we're often not sure if our idea is good enough, if anyone will care about what we have to write, or if we really have what it takes to see our project through. And I totally get this. This fear is real. But successful authors feel this fear and they feel their doubts and they forge ahead anyways. So having the courage to start puts you in that rare 1% club of people who actually dare to turn their dreams and ideas into things, to real things. And here also you can see on the screen, there's a quote by Brene Brown, who I love immensely. She says, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort, but you cannot choose both. So part of being a successful writer is having the courage to start. Okay. Let me make this screen a little larger. Okay, great. Number 2 is motivation and commitment. So here are two big things that we need, all essential, all writers need in order to be successful authors. So it takes a strong well of inner motivation and commitment and desire to write. You need to be willing to take your project seriously, but even more importantly, you need to be willing to take yourself seriously. Writing a book takes grit and it takes commitment. People who half-heartedly commit to a book hardly ever actually finish writing. You have to go all in. It takes a firm commitment, and authorship is not necessarily for the faint of heart. You know, being too busy is one of the most common excuses I hear writers offer for why they're not able to write their books. And I totally get it. You know, for most of us, life moves at lightning speed and we have so much on our plates already. So there's always that question of, like, do we have enough time to write? Do we have the capacity to make that commitment? And here's the thing, we have to be willing to reclaim our time as our own and to declare how we will choose to spend that same 24 hours that all of us are given in order to make a difference and in order to forge ahead on projects that really matter to us. So the only way you actually have time to write a book is if you make time to write a book and that you bring it into your schedule. You know, and we'll also talk about this a little bit more later. That doesn't mean that you have to have a totally clear schedule. You can absolutely write a book with your professional and personal commitments. You never have to let go of your non-negotiables, your priorities. But it does mean making your book a priority and organizing your life to align with this priority of yours. And what that often looks like is actually scheduling time and your days and your weeks to write and to guard those sacred spaces like a fierce mama jaguar. You know, and this really made all the difference in the world for me when I wrote my book, Birth Your Story, and I've seen it totally change the game for my clients. You have to treat this time like you would your most important life commitments. So let's pause for a moment. I wonder if you might consider, what are the non-negotiables in your life right now? What are the things that really matter to you? Maybe it's time with your kids. Maybe it's your Saturday morning movement class. Maybe it's showing up for client sessions on Thursdays and Mondays or whatever days you meet with people. So I invite you just to consider those for a moment. And then I ask you, would you be willing to make your book writing time as important as these other non-negotiables? And if the answer is yes, or if the answer is, I think so, but ideally, yes, you have this essential quality that all successful authors need. In my private coaching and in my upcoming group program, we spend time talking about how to invite writing into your life in a way that actually feels good to you and actually works for your life. We absolutely can make time and space in our lives for writing if we make it important enough, and it doesn't have to compete with those non-negotiables that you just brought to mind. You know, I'd love to touch on another point. Some people say, and you'll read this in a lot of writing books, is that if you're going to write, you have to write every day. So for some of us, this is absolutely the best schedule, and it's what we need in order to get a big writing project done. But it's not the only way. So for example, Cheryl Strayed, who's a very successful author, she's written a book called Wild, another book called Tiny Beautiful Things, and many other amazing books. I heard her recently on an interview, and she talks about how she binge writes. So she actually goes into her metaphorical writing den, usually a hotel room she checks herself into somewhere in town where she's away from her family for a few days. And she just goes into an intense writing space for 2 or 3 days and gets a lot done. So she doesn't necessarily write on a regular schedule. And the more you'll hear other successful authors talk, the more they say, yes, it's important to have a routine. It's important to stay true and committed and engaged with your writing, but not everybody's process looks the same. So the key is to really find the rhythm that allows you to stay motivated and committed to showing up for steady progress on your book project. The other thing that really helps is to have a writing container or a writing ritual that works for you. So we'll explore this more in my coaching program, but what I do personally, this is what I've found to be so successful, is that I've created what I call cave mode, or creative cave mode. And so when I've decided that I need time to work on a book or work on a project for my business, I mark out in my calendar, this is my creative cave time. And during creative cave time, I turn off my phone, I turn off the internet on my computer, I clear my desk of everything that's not related to my project, and I set my timer. Like maybe it's a 90-minute session, I just go straight in. And I have been amazed at how much more productive I am by setting those boundaries for myself. So it's really a ritual. You know, I clear the space of what is going to distract, because the world is full of distractions these days. There's always going to be an incoming email, an incoming text message. You know, somebody needs something from us. So part of becoming a successful author and really committing to the project is to create these spaces, these containers for your writing where you can really dive deeply and get some effective work done. When I was writing Birth Your Story, I had a baby at home. And so what I would do is I got a sitter for maybe 3 or 4 hours twice a week. I went to the same coffee shop. I ordered the same latte. I sat in the same spot and I wrote. And so that was a container that really worked for me at that time. So it really depends on where you are in your life. But the key is to find what works for you and to develop that rhythm and ritual of continuing to come to that creative space. So all successful writers get curious about the writing containers they need, and they commit to those. So I encourage you to consider what might be an effective creative cave for yourself and how to bring that into your life. So some of you might say, but wait, Jamie, I can't do this as one to my next point. But this also, I think, is essential. Committing to your book project means slowing down just a little bit, even just a little bit, because a creative process takes both action and reflection. It takes white space in our days. So creativity, and this is something that's really important to me as a philosophy in my book coaching practice, is that creativity, it's not just production mode. It's a holistic and organic process. It's much more like Mother Nature than it is like the assembly line. And so we need space for action and reflection. You know, we need space to go take a walk and think about things. We need a moment of time to ourselves to really reflect and deepen and process everything that we've been working on in our creative work. So our creative genius needs those moments of space in our lives. And we also need legit mental breaks from complex projects and creations. So in my work, I talk about these natural cycles of creativity. So I apply basically the seasons, the moon cycles, and other organic processes to the creative process, and specifically the book writing process. So I'll be sending you out all a PDF that helps you dive deeper into what we talk about today. And one of them will have the link to a resource that I share for free about the creative cycles. So there's really these 4 seasons of our writing process that we need to honor. And one of them is that taking a break and taking some space, which is akin to winter or the new moon. So I'll be sharing that with you later. But it really is important to ally with these creative cycles in order to be effective in your writing process. Okay. All right, let's go on to number 3. So number 3 is anchoring in your why. So one of the best ways to stay committed and motivated to your writing project is to do what I call anchoring in your why. And this is because purpose creates drive. Knowing why you're writing, why your project matters to you, and how it will benefit others is a huge key to unlocking that motivation and commitment you need to start and finish your book. Anchoring into your why can mean the difference between a half-finished abandoned draft collecting virtual dust on your computer versus a best-selling book that's out there in the world actually making an impact. So anchoring in your why means getting crystal clear about why you are writing your book in the first place. What are the factors compelling you to write this book? Why does this book matter to you? Why is this worth investing your time, your energy, your resources? And what value will you bring to both yourself and the world through writing this book? And then lastly, what will it actually feel like to write and publish this book? And really, the more clearly you can root into your personal answers to these questions and actually feel them, the more likely you will be able to soar into authorship on the wings of the book eagles. And just so you know, in the accompanying PDF that I'll send out with this webinar, I have some reflection questions. So if you didn't catch all of those, they are in the PDF that I'll send you right after the call. I suggest getting super clear on your answers to these questions before you start writing. And I also encourage you or suggest that you can display this somewhere prominently in your work writing space, or even if it's the folder you have for your work, for your writing project, whatever it is, so that you can keep coming back to this anchor of why you're doing what you're doing. I'd love to share with you what I call the rave review exercise. And this is also in the PDF, but I'll explain it to you briefly. So this is a super, super powerful visioning activity to help you vision and anchor into your why. So after this call, you can open up a fresh page in your journal, a new Word document, or you can go into the PDF that I'll send you. And the idea is to imagine that your book is already written and it's been published. Maybe a month or so has passed since you published your book, and you get an email from somebody who read your book. And this person was completely transformed by your book, by your words, your ideas, your stories. And they're writing this email to you to tell you how and why your book made such an impact on their lives. So in their own voice, you write this email. And I dare you not to cry. And I double dare you not to let your inner critic come in and have something to say about this process. Okay. So that is anchoring in your why, really knowing why your project matters to you and why it will matter to others. Number 4 is passion for your topic. So this is the 4th thing you need to become a successful author. So if you're half-heartedly or mildly interested in your book topic, the chances of you actually getting through the book writing process and publication process are pretty low. But if you're really fired up about your project and you could talk about your topic for the rest of your life, your chances of success are much greater. As we've covered, it takes a lot of energy and time to write a book, not to mention the time it takes to edit, produce, and market the book as well. So it's a big commitment. You have to be passionate about your project, and that passion has to have staying power. So you can ask yourself, as you're thinking about the topics that you have, you can, sorry, I'm just adding somebody. Okay. You can really consider if this is a project, if this is a topic that you're truly passionate about. And this is, so the 5-year question is simple, am I going to be passionate about this topic, this project 3 to 5 years from now? And so if the answer is heck yes, I definitely do. I definitely will have this passion for at least 3 to 5 years, then I would say you have what it takes to become an author on this particular topic. If your answer is like, I don't know, maybe, you might want to shelve this idea or hit pause and wait for the one that's really, really got you, the one that really lights you up and has staying power. And again, don't let your inner commitment phobe, and I say that because I have one too, don't let them answer this question. Ask your soul. Ask the deeper part of you that really knows which project is best for you. Okay, number 5, and I do see some questions there, and I promise I'm going to get to them. I'm so glad that you're asking. Okay, so number 5 is having a degree of expertise. So hope you like this little buddy. So book writing is not like writing a blog or an article. It requires much more depth. So good books are written by authors who have a deep, intimate, and nuanced understanding of their subject. They've considered their subject more deeply than most people have, and they've synthesized that knowing into something that's really valuable and something that they can share with others. So you have to know what you're talking about. And this goes for books in which you share your stories, and books that you share your ideas or your stories and your ideas. So whether you're writing memoir or fiction, you do have to have a degree of expertise and a degree of having digested and processed your material so that you can present it to other people. But here's the thing about that, because that can be really intimidating. And a lot of us, will hear the inner critic come up at this time and say, but Jamie, or to yourself, who am I? I'm not an expert. So what I will say is that the process of writing a book is actually a process of developing your expertise. So you do have to have a degree of expertise going in. So it would be difficult for me, I've dabbled in gardening, but I'm not an expert. It would be difficult for me to choose to write a book about permaculture right now. I could, but it would be really challenging. Whereas I might choose a topic that I have a lot of information about and a lot of insight and a lot of experience with. I may have not fully processed everything or have a super, super clear idea about everything that's going to happen in my book, because book writing is very much a process of discovery, but I have to have some degree of knowledge going in. So that's a piece about becoming a successful author. And I'll just add here, you don't have to have everything perfectly figured out or know everything about your topic in order to start. Okay. Number 6 is the willingness to tango with your inner critic. And I say tango, you can supply whatever dance style you enjoy, or maybe not, or whatever dance you're willing to do with the inner critic. And so the inner critic, we all have the inner critic. We all have it. No matter how much personal growth work we've done, no matter how much healing we've done, we all have the inner critic. And it's something that, its essential function in our lives, in our psyche, is to keep us safe. And to it, the idea of writing a book and becoming exposed for our ideas and our stories is scary to the inner critic. And so it often sabotages our writing dreams. So again, the thing about the inner critic is that we can't eliminate it, and fighting it really just drains our energy. So we have to find a way to dance with it and find a way to manage it so that it can exist and it can give us its red flags, but it doesn't stop us and it doesn't slow us down. So this is something I work with my clients. It's the first thing we talk about when I do book coaching with people is what is the flavor of your inner critic? Like, what does it have to say to you? What are your fears? And we work with that and we monitor the inner critic as we go through the writing process, because it is often the thing that sneaks in and stops us from doing what we came to do. So we want to move, and this is what I'll offer you as a suggestion, is that we want to move from, so the inner critic lives in the ego, and I'm not going to bash the ego here. There's nothing wrong with the inner critic or the ego. It's just that sometimes it cannot serve us when we go to do big projects like this. So we want to move from this fear to more of a place of soul, courage, and heartfelt service. So what I suggest is anytime, and I offer many, many resources about the inner critic, but a simple one is to continue to go back to your why. Continue to go back to what is your service through this book? What is the thing that you're contributing to your own life and others? And continue to stay rooted in that. Continue to listen to the inner critic, but remember that just because that thought comes up doesn't mean that you have to believe it, and doesn't mean that you have to actually act from that place. Steven Pressfield has some great books about this. One of them is called The War of Art. He also has another book called Do the Work and Turning Pro. And those are great books for managing the inner critic, he calls it resistance, managing the resistance that comes up when we dare to do something really big, like write a book. So let's move on to number 7. So number 7 is planning. So those who plan their books, this is a statistic from a study, those who actually plan out their books before they write are 60% more likely to be successful in their writing. So no one builds a successful business without creating a business plan. No one creates a successful marriage by just getting hitched to a casual acquaintance. And no one just throws a bunch of wood and metal together haphazardly to build the home of their dreams. These things take planning, just like a book, and you must build a solid foundation before you start. So same thing with writing. And it may not feel sexy to have a plan or to do all of this planning, but it is what it takes to become a successful author. This is part of what I do in my private coaching, as well as the upcoming group project group book coaching that we'll do together. So during the process of planning, you get crystal clear about who you are to write your book, what your book is about, how you will organize and structure your ideas, and who your readers are, and so much more. So you lay out that foundation, and the more clear you can get about those fundamental pieces of your project, the more success you'll have, and the more time you'll save, the more energy you'll save, and the more frustration you'll spare yourself. So planning and building a solid foundation will greatly increase your chances of success, and it'll also make you feel a lot better through the writing process. And feeling good is sexy. So, okay. So number 8. So the 8th thing we need in order to be successful writers, successful authors, is to have clarity around who our audience is. So you have to know who your book is for, how to meet them in your writing, and how to serve them meaningfully with your book. So I encourage all my clients to definitely write. So this is a little bit of a space of paradox when it comes to the writing process, is that in some ways, and this is often what I encourage people to do, is to write for yourself first. And I talk about how like our creative alliance is to our book project and to the ideas that want to come through us. But we also have to hold space for our audience, because if we don't know who we're writing for, we don't know how to reach them effectively in our books. So we want to make sure that we transmit the truth and the purest expression of what we have to say in our books, but we also want to have audience awareness. And so some of this comes in phases. So for example, in the first draft of a book, I always suggest that people really work on that transmission of truth as true as it can come through. And then the revision process is often where we refine and make sure we're more effective at reaching our audience. But regardless of that process, we want to know who our audience is at the outset, because it's going to shape what we say, what we don't say, how we say it, what kinds of objections we might address, all those things in our book. And you might be saying, well, Jamie, my book is for everybody. And I would love to quote a mentor of mine, a business mentor of mine, Marie Forleo. She says, if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. And she's got like this great Jersey accent, so that lands a little bit better when she says it. But basically, nobody's book is for everybody. Not even the Bible, not even the bestsellers of all time. No book is for everyone. So it really helps to harness and hone in on really clearly who it is that you're speaking to in your book. And you may have multiple audience segments. You might say, oh, my book is for educators, but it's also for parents. And that's okay. And that's part of the process of knowing that you might have more than one audience. But it does help to really focus on one and then use your energy and attention in your book writing process to really speak to them through your writing. We go into audience clarity, both in the PDF that I'll send you later today, and then also in my coaching programs. Okay. So we are clipping right along. So number 9, so the 9th thing that it takes to become a successful author is stamina and perseverance. So this is one of the things that I talk about in my creative manifesto, which I'll also link in that PDF, is that you have to be committed for the long haul if you want to successfully write a book. So writing a book is not a 50-meter dash. It's not a sprint. It's an endurance sport. It's the Iditarod. It's one of those insane 100-mile runs that people do voluntarily that just totally blow my mind. But seriously, you do have to have stamina in order to, and perseverance in order to get your book all the way through to completion. And here's a cold, hard look at the writing process. It takes many creatives months, if not years, to write the first draft of their book. Oftentimes you can shave that time way down by having the right support, which we'll talk about in a little while. But the editing process can take up to a year. The production process also takes time, depending on whether you self-publish or traditionally publish. It can take 1 or 2 years. And then there's also promoting and marketing your book. So it is a long game. And so it really helps to have that mindset that this is a long process. It doesn't have to be grueling. If you're, I don't know how, everyone has their own relationship to snow here. So don't get too discouraged by the woman in the mountains here in the snow. But it is absolutely possible. We just have to have the right mindset. So we have to have the mindset of taking micro steps through our project. So to hold that whole process in our minds at once is like too much to really hold. So what I often find successful for writers is that it's not that, they get into their writing process and it's not, okay, I'm writing a book. Like I'm writing this 300-page thing that is going to take all this, all these steps in the process to complete, but rather I'm going to write this chapter today, or I'm going to write this scene today, or I'm going to kind of clarify some pieces of my table of contents today. We take one baby step at a time, and that's how you get up the mountain. Furthermore, taking breaks and resting are absolutely crucial. So I have a lot of clients who are like, oh, but I haven't worked on my book in a week, and I'm like, are you thinking about it in the shower? Like, yep. Are you thinking about it when you go take your dog for a walk? Yep. Have you been taking some notes when ideas come to you? Yep. So sometimes writing doesn't always look like sitting down with your fingers, tapping through on your computer. Sometimes it takes reflection. Sometimes it takes waiting for something to fully articulate inside of you so that you can write it down. So it's about having this stamina and perseverance. And it's just like a relationship. You have to continue to say yes to it. Okay. So we are on to number 10. So number 10 is having accountability and support. So it's a huge myth that writers create in isolation without any support. And I'll be super honest with you. So I've written 2 books with 0 support. And it was a mess. The first one took me 5 years to complete, and I never even got it past the first draft process because I got stuck and I didn't know what to do. I had a 300-page manuscript and I didn't know what to do next. This was about 10 years ago. The second one took me 4 years to write. And again, I had no support. So I had nobody checking in on me. I had no accountability. You know, if I put my book project away because my inner critic reared up its head and said, "Who are you to write this book?" I had no one to help me pick it back up again. I had nobody to remind me that I did have what it took to write this book. And so it took a lot longer for me to get there. You know, eventually I did have an editor after I made it through my first draft on my second book, and that was supportive. But even during the editing process, I was like left alone again, where I just really didn't have any support or any accountability. So having the right support saves you time, it saves you energy, it saves you resources, a whole heck of a lot of frustration. And it also increases the chances that you'll be more successful getting all the way through your project, because that's the typical story for most writers is they pick it up and they work on it and engage with it, and something happens, either life gets in the way or the inner critic comes in, and we stop and we may never start again. And so that's how you hear about, you know, writers that have been writing for 10 years on a project and haven't moved forward. So there's different kinds of writing support. And because birth metaphors are totally my jam, I'm going to make a birth analogy here. So bear with me here. And this is just for these purposes. We're going to call you the birthing woman, and the book is your baby. And so again, you know, if you listen to any Liz Gilbert, you'll hear, you know, your book is not your baby, but for this analogy, we're going to use this. So your friends and family are the support that are like your partner in a birthing situation. So they love you, they support you, and they're going to the best of their ability, they're going to be there for you. But they're out of their league when it comes to birth, or in this case, a book. They don't necessarily know what it takes to write a book or to birth a baby. They love you, but they're not necessarily going to monitor your progress and make sure that this baby gets delivered. So the second kind of support you can have, both for birth and for writing your book, is, well, the book version is a writing retreat or a workshop that's just sort of standalone. So this is like the kind nurse who comes in when you're maybe like 6 centimeters dilated and gives you ice chips. And she's amazing, but she's there for like a couple minutes and then she's gone again. So a writing retreat is a lot like that. It can be amazing in the moment. It can be super useful, but it doesn't necessarily help you move ahead, or it doesn't give you that consistency of support that you might need through your entire process. The third kind of support is a writer's group. And I hope that this metaphor lands well, or this translation, but it's a lot like the other birthing moms in the maternity wing. So they're also birthing their creations into the world. And you maybe go out and you check on them and you give them like that knowing nod and like, I got you and you got me. And, you know, I even offer each other a coping ritual or something like that, but they are also engaged deeply in their own creative process. So we're relying solely on other authors can be supportive, but might not give you the people, you know, might not offer you the space holding and the expertise that you need for the whole process. So then there's a book editor. And book editors are amazing. If you find the right editor, they're amazing. But they're more like the pediatric nurses that come in right after baby's been born. You know, they don't come on scene until you're done with your first draft. So you have to get all the way there. You have to get through the labor in order for them to show up. And so they're not necessarily going to help you through labor. And if there's no draft, or if there's no baby, there's no baby nurse. So the editor never comes on scene if you can't get to that first complete draft. And then the last source of support, and there may be others, but this is the last I'm going to talk about, is the book coach. So we are like the doulas of the book world. We meet with you when you first discover you're gestating this project. We come in at the first sign that labor is beginning, and we stay with you until your baby's born, even if you're a first-time mama and that journey takes 3 days, heaven forbid. We offer you evidence-based support. We offer emotional support. We offer professional referrals, and we help you gently move through the birth process. So no matter what kind of combination of support you have, and again, it's really about finding and getting really clear about the kind of support that you have capacity for and what you'd most benefit from. So everybody has a different combination of those sources of support. But it is important to have support. And even if it's the minimum of somebody that you love who's on your side, who is going to ask you regularly, like, hey, could you check in with me twice a month about my book project? And even that degree of accountability can make a huge difference. But the more support that you have through your book writing process, the more likely you are to be successful in writing your book. So let's take a deep breath here. I've been telling you lots of things. I appreciate you being here and listening. So those are the 10 steps, 10 things that it takes to become a successful writer. And I'd love to share with you now the 3 things that many people think you need to write, but you actually don't. So the first thing is a background in writing. So most of the people that I work with are not professional writers. They're coaches, they're healers, they're therapists, they're midwives, they're mamas, they're entrepreneurs, they're artists, they're counselors. So many of the best transformational books out there, the books that really make an impact in people's lives, are not written by somebody who has an MFA or, any background in professional writing, but they're the experts and the passionate professionals in their field who dare to write what they know down for other people to benefit from. So you do have to be a decent writer, but you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a pro, and you don't have to have had formal training in writing. So the editing process is a huge space where your writing can be refined and strengthened. I do have a blog on my website called Shitty First Drafts, which is actually a term, I don't know if she coined it, but that Anne Lamott talks about. And Brene Brown has also talked about shitty first drafts. So nothing that we often read as like a final copy of a book is really what came out the first round. It's the product of a lot of editing and a lot of refining and revision. And so knowing that your first draft is not going to come out perfect, but trusting the editing and revision process to help your ideas and your transmission come through as clearly and as effectively as possible. So that's the first one. You do not need a background in writing. Number 2 is that you don't need no job and a clear schedule. I've heard from some people like, I'm just going to wait until I can go away in the mountains and, for a season or a year. I'm just going to wait till I retire. I'm just going to wait until my kids are grown, or, there's lots of things. And this is the inner critic talking. There's lots of things that can come through that can stall us. So this is one of those big myths. You don't need a clear schedule to write your book. You absolutely can write in your book in the life that you're currently living. You just have to make it a priority, like we talked about before. Not to say that that's easy, but it's doable. And then you have to take those steady steps to turn your book into a reality. And again, this kind of ties in with number 3, which is 100% readiness. So you don't have to have 100% readiness in order to start. It's actually kind of a myth that 100% readiness actually exists. It's rare for someone to feel 100% ready. It's a lot like having a baby. Like there's never really a perfect time. There's always another degree you could get, or training you could get, or, another vacation to take, or, maybe you let, your babies get older, whatever it might be. But that's not how the creative process works. It doesn't really wait for us to have our life tidy. It waits for us to be ready and to say that we're ready. So one of the things I suggest is to go by the soul test. And I talk about soul a lot. So your soul, or your higher knowing, or whatever resonates for you, he or she knows when it's time to write this book. She's going to keep nudging you and inspiring you and preoccupying you about this vision for your book. He or she might gently continue to insist despite all your brain's logical excuses. And your soul will often not leave you alone. So the thing about the soul is that it's quieter than the ego. So we have to get quiet enough to really hear what she has to say. Because your ego is the one that shouts and screams and says, no, 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 this is all the reasons. Marie Forleo also said there's people with the reasons and there's people with results. So getting past those ego reasons to not write and to tap into that deeper voice inside of you that knows what this project is for, knows when it's time. And I suggest listening to that voice. We talk about this, getting to that voice and getting also to a deep connection with the consciousness of our books in my coaching programs as well, so that this voice can really be the one that leads the charge. And I imagine that if your soul is ready for this, you might be feeling her whispers or her rumblings right now. Okay, so those are the 3 things you don't need. So let's go ahead and recap quickly. So the 10 essentials for successful authorship. So 1, having the courage to actually start. 2, being motivated and committed to continue on in your book project. Staying anchored, clarifying your why and staying anchored in that throughout the process. Having passion for what you want to write about. Having a degree of expertise, but remember, we don't have to be like steady, perfect experts in our topic in order to write. The willingness to tango with our inner critic and to continue to dance with her and love her despite her misguidance, and continue to work with her through the process. Planning, being able to plan your book before you start. Having clarity around your audience and knowing how to meet them in your book. Having stamina and perseverance to get through the process, taking one micro step at a time. And then also having the kind of accountability and support that would really best serve you. So I'd love to hear from you now. The other, and then the 3 things we talked about, I'll go back just for a moment, just to recap everything. The 3 things that we talked about that you don't need are professional writing skills or a writing background, a clear schedule, no job, no responsibilities. And then the last one is 100% readiness. So I'd love to hear from you if you'd like to share. I just did a whole lot of talking, so I'd love to hear from you. Which one of these resonated for you, or were there any ahas that you got as we went through these essentials for successful authorship? So feel free to join in the chat here, and I'll take a look. I'll take a look here as we take a pause and just see what came in. Okay. All right, great. Lori, that's awesome. Oh, I'm glad you read my book. Okay. I'm calling from Ontario. Great. Okay. And hi, Christina from Asheville. Okay, I want to start a book project. Amazing. Okay, Jess asked, I have a lot of writing blocks. Do you have any suggestions on getting past them? Okay, yes, I do. Again, writing blocks, to me, a lot of what writing blocks are is the inner critic coming in. And she often stops us. It's either the inner critic coming in and saying things like, who are you to write this book? Or you're not good enough for whatever reasons. So oftentimes it's the inner critic. Sometimes it's lack of clarity. So you don't know exactly who you're writing for. You don't know exactly what your project is about. You haven't done the work to structure and organize your ideas so that you feel good moving forward. Maybe things feel overwhelming because you're taking on the whole project in your mind at once rather than doing those micro steps. So there's a lot of different things that we call writing blocks. So we've talked about some of those today, but that's something that I work with people on through their processes and really get curious about what are those writing blocks, what are the beliefs in our head about what's holding us back, and then how do we move forward. So if you have any specifics, those of you who are on the call, if you have any specifics or any thoughts you want to share at this time about your own writing project or any questions you have, I encourage you to share those now. And I'll keep an eye on the chat here if you have any questions. But in the meantime, I just briefly want to share with you the 2 ways that I help book writers be successful in my coaching work. So the first one is I offer private coaching, and I offer private coaching at 3, 6, or 9 month intervals. My entire program is ideally 9 months. I do like that it parallels the human gestation process. I find that those of my clients who have committed to a 9 month program often find that it's like the most sanely paced process. And I often find that they're the ones who really do come out with a book at the end because it's something that they can work into their lives. And I have worked with professionals. I just am finishing a program with a midwife, and she has a busy practice. She's got 3 kids, and she has just steadily found some space every week to engage in her process. And she's shown up with a new chapter every time we talk. And so the 9 month program has been really helpful for her. Others, want to try a shorter program at first, and that's an option too. The best way to check out and explore more about my private coaching is to sign up for a free discovery call on my on my website. And this is a 100% free 30-minute call. It helps us. I do an intake, so I get some information about your writing project. And we spend that half an hour just really supporting you and figuring out whether a coaching process would be appropriate for you, whether it would be a good fit to actually help you write your book. So that's option one, is the private coaching. The second option, I just introduced this, and I'm experimenting with it. It's a small group coaching program. So we're going to begin in May. We're going to kick off a 3-day in-person retreat here in Asheville, North Carolina. And it will be 3 days of all that planning, all the laying of that solid, foolproof book foundation that will give you all the clarity and confidence you need to move forward. So that'll be live in person here in Asheville at the first weekend of May. And then after that, later in May, we'll start joining bi-weekly or bi-monthly, twice a month, over the internet. So it's a hybrid of an online course and an in-person course. And I've always wished in group programs that I do, especially those that are based online, that there was this real human connection that was established at the beginning. And so that's why I love this container, is that we get together in real time. And so some of the questions some people have asked so far about the group program is like, well, how much sharing do I have to do with other people? And especially if your book is like a newer project, some people feel timid, like really sharing a lot. So it will be, led by me. We're doing a lot of activities and exercises. We're bringing in our creativity in different ways through this initial group retreat. And you share to the extent that you want. So if it's really process support that you need, this activity around authorship was really hard for me, or it really illuminated a lot for me, like that could be a sufficient share. Or if you're like, hey, what do you think? I'm writing my book about this. Like, who should I be speaking to? I've got these ideas. You can actually get some feedback from your fellow authors in that context as well. So that'll be the group retreat. And then again, we'll meet twice a month for the next 6 months after that. And it'll give you an opportunity to check in so you can stay really accountable. And I'm also going to be doing some spotlight group coaching for people. So you'll get to hear what other people are experiencing and learn from that dialogue between us around their process, because some things might come up that you haven't thought of, that sort of thing. And it'll also allow you to get some personal coaching time. The benefit of the small group is that it's a little bit of a lower price point. So I made it intentionally for people who might not be able to do private coaching, although my private coaching is very affordable compared to the marketplace right now for book coaching. But it just gives you an opportunity too, if you're one of those people that really loves to leverage the power of a group, it gives you the opportunity to write your book in tandem with other authors who are also doing this courageous act. So the way to learn more about that is to go on my website, which is jamieflares.com, and you can learn more. There's a thing on the homepage that talks about book coaching, and if you click on the link there, it'll go to the details about that program. Okay. Oh, hi, Lori. I see. Okay, I'm stuck on writing an outline. I just started writing stories. Writing my story starting point. Great. Content editor, the process. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear. Yeah, it's really great when you can bring in some support, especially in this drafting process. That's excellent. Do you feel like you have moved past the stuckness on your writing outline, or do you feel like there's still more work to do there? I'll ask you that. And I will say too that the outline can be a really challenging place for a lot of people because we want to kind of organize our ideas. And again, this is one of the places where paradox can live sometimes in the writing process, is that we need to have enough structure established so that we can move forward in our writing process. But because the writing process itself is an act of discovery, we often learn what we have to say and how we have to say it as we write, that it has to be a living and breathing organism that changes and evolves as we move through the book writing process. And so sometimes we may have these like unsolvable lingering questions. And yes, absolutely, Lori, let me just finish this thought. And they're not solvable until we actually get to that step in the book writing process. Let me see if I can bring you on here, Lori. I'd love to hear. Okay, I'm unmuting you. Can you hear me? Are you there?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Lori. Yes, say more. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear, how it's going for you.
Okay. First, I'd like to say thank you so much for your Birth Your Story book.
Oh, you're welcome.
I learned from it. I took, I'm in the Koya community.
Oh, beautiful.
Koya teacher.
Yeah.
And I did the Call to Create, and that's where I learned about your work. And so I felt I got this call to write my birth story, and I procrastinated for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And And then it came really clear this last fall. So I had written a lot of detail, and then I hired a content editor to help bring it into like a smaller essay, 2,000 words.
Sure.
This piece. Mm-hmm. And it was so valuable to learn what an editor does and how helpful it is to have the support.
Yes.
And also for helping me to dig deeper and to show, not tell. Mm-hmm. And so then I came up with this story that, I don't know, it just taught me so much. So now it's like I want to unpack some of the themes that have come out of it.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about the soul test, I had this, I was inspired to write this book, and it's called Breaking Through the Buckskin. Mm. And so it's like breaking through the stereotypes. Initially, there's a lot of stereotypes about Indigenous people, and I'm Indigenous, and also worked a lot on advocating for Indigenous rights. So initially I thought it's about, talking about Indigenous rights and all that sort of thing, but really breaking through the buckskin, it's my personal breaking through. Mm. And so I had the idea a few years ago. It keeps coming back. And so then I start writing. They do. And then I get stuck. And right now I've met with my family. It's like to clear my slate in a sense, to allow me more time to write and more time in that creative process. Sure. And so I'm just exploring how to get more support to get this book out there.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like you're really stepping into this project. It's really beautiful to see that.
Yeah, because even what it's about, it's evolving, I think, as I evolve. Mm-hmm. And a great part of that has been, like, in teaching Koya, and the whole Koya practice has been opening up, just deepening my understanding. Mm-hmm. And so the outline. So it's like, I just really get stuck there and trying to get this outline done, thinking like I really need to get that, and then putting those chunks together. Yeah. And so how could coaching help with that? And I've got lots written.
Mm-hmm. It's just about organizing and getting, and figuring out, just like you did with your birth story, really figuring out what belongs in this book and what does not. And sometimes you don't quite know that until the end. For example, when I wrote Birth Your Story, there were whole chapters that didn't make it into the final. It was like, I needed to write them. I needed to have that process. I needed to flesh those things out for myself in writing, but they didn't necessarily make it into what the reader needed on the other end. So that often happens. I offer, we do a lot of work around organizing and refining and structuring through the coaching program. I will say that I offer oftentimes a menu of, just like I did in the book, I offer a menu of options for people for how they can work with it. So one of the things that I really love is the process of using a big poster board. I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about this before, but sometimes when we have a lot of ideas or a lot of moving pieces, we actually need a bigger container than a piece of paper will allow us, or our computer screen. And so bringing back that inner school kid, that's okay, I got my big poster board and I've got my colors and I'm willing to draw and map things. You can start with your central idea and move outward to these are the main pieces of what I want to write, and then what goes under. And so you can start to map things out. And again, getting them out of your head and onto paper can be really helpful. I was suggested this process at an evening with the angels workshop that I did once, and that was their question, that was their offering to me. I was I'm making this huge health decision, I don't know what to do, everything feels really complex, and they were put it on a poster board. I was thank you, angels. And so but that's what I did, and I was shocked at how clear it made things for me. So that can be one tool. I offer a number of other tools to my clients as well. And the great thing about coaching is that I can get a look at your work. You can send me documents and we can work through talking through your process and all of those things. So we can move you from those murky areas of I'm not really sure into more clarity. Cause sometimes you just need to talk it out. Sometimes you need somebody else's set of eyes on things. And then the other thing again, and this is why I'm so passionate about laying this foundation, is that if you really know who you're writing about two, and you really know what you're writing about and why it matters, you can start to make decisions based on that foundation, you know? So you can say, okay, well, if I'm really speaking to this population, then these are the things that they're going to need to know at different parts of the story, or these are the things that I'm going to want to reveal through that process. Sometimes if it's more personal memoir, it's less of like, what do they need to know at what points, you know, like maybe a how-to book might be. But you can still start to get to shape your ideas and all of your stories in a way that's really effective for you and helps you move forward. Another thing I'll say is sometimes, you know, we can get lost in just the writing. And again, this is another place of paradox, because the first draft is all about writing down what we know and just like getting what we have in here out on paper, without necessarily having it all perfectly figured out. But at some point we need to like rein it in and give it a container. You know, it's just like we talk about in Koya, like structure creates freedom. So I really honor that in the writing process too, where we want to continue to offer structure in the way that it serves the creativity that we're working with in our project. How does all that land? And do you have any other questions, or do you feel like I gave you something useful there?
Yeah, no, I hear you what you're saying. I like that idea. I'm going to go to the store probably immediately after and get that, because I feel like it's like visually need to see it.
Yeah.
Now, you know, because I've got numerous books and notes all over the place.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask too is, you know, and I question myself, it's like, am I just being too stuck on this one, like this breaking through the buckskin? It's just like, I don't know, it keeps coming back. And then I think like, could it be different, but it just seems to, I don't know.
Yeah. You know, I would say to that, I mean, trust that nudge from your soul. If she keeps saying like, no, it's this, you know, listen. But also I think what helps, this is another thing, again, there's more than 10 things that it takes to be a successful writer. But one of the things is to hold our ideas with an open palm, you know, hold these things, these stories, these ways of telling, even our book titles, you know, with an open palm, where we're not gripping so tight that we crush them, you know, we crush the creativity out of them, but we allow them to be, and we get curious about them. Again, it's just like a relationship with anybody or anything. It's like, we have to remain curious. Like, what's alive now? Like, that was true for a long time, but is that still true now? And are we still moving ahead with the same premises or the same title or the same structure, or does it need to be revisited? Do we need to evolve it? Do we need to change? So I think it takes a lot of curiosity and engagement with the creativity that's working with you to continue to ask those questions and see what's true now, you know, and it might evolve, it might change, you know. A lot of people's, you know, framework changes as they move through. But I do think that the supportive thing about that is that it is offering you some structure, like it's offering you a container. And I think that a container is helpful. So it's just continuing to stay curious with it and get really honest about, like, is this actually holding me back? Or is it something that is a useful container still for the project that I'm wanting to do?
Right. And I think I like the idea of like a teaching memoir or a book where that it would be useful for somebody to read, like kind of a how-to in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times memoirs are a how-to, you know, memoirs make arguments just like nonfiction books do. They just do so in a different way. Yeah. So instead of laying out like, these are the 5 steps to becoming empowered, you know, it's more like, let me show you how I became empowered through these stories. Right. And by the way, you can too, you know, or, you know, people find their places of connection in memoir and in story. And then they can take from your own experience those values, you know, those nuggets of wisdom that they can carry forward. So it is just a matter of like, what's your strategy? You know, which way are you doing that? And story can be so potent because it helps us to really express, you know, story is what we remember. It's what holds the emotion, you know, it's what is really translatable and relatable to others. And so it's a really powerful, thing to do, to utilize in your book. But it is good to get clear on whether you want to write more of a how-to book or whether you want to write more of a memoir book, with the idea that they're both going to offer essential truths through them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I know you offer like the exploration session.
Yep.
Would I be able to use that to kind of figure out if personal coaching or the small group coaching, like I'm kind of open to either one. And
Yeah.
I like the idea of working in groups too.
Yeah. Yeah, let's hop on the phone and talk more in private, and we can talk more
Okay.
about what might be the best fit for you. And that's my intention. You know, I've talked to some people out of this program as well, just because I think it's really important for it to be a good fit for you. And I'd be happy to explore that with you further to see what would be best. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. And then this is the last slide here. I am offering people just to thank you for being on the call and taking time to spend, part of your Monday with me. So if you do either schedule the discovery call or apply for the group program within the next 24 hours, I'll offer you a free 60-minute coaching session on top of that after you join one of those programs. So that's just a little offer I'm throwing out for those who are live on the call and also who are going to listen to the recording later today. So I think, let's see, I'm at the end of my material. Lori, I think you're the last one left on the call. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to stick around and chat. Otherwise, I'd love to speak with you privately further so we can just explore what's the right fit for you. And to other people who might be listening to this later, I'm available through email. It's Jamie@jamieflares.com. And I'm here to answer any questions you have about authorship and about coaching and all of those things. So, Lori, do you have anything else you want to share? Or
I think I wouldn't mind connecting later and then kind of going through things. But yes, this has been like extremely helpful.
Oh, good.
And
good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear. Excellent. Well, so nice to connect with you. I feel like I know you in the virtual realms, and I guess this is still the virtual realms, but it's really nice to be speaking with you live. And thank you to everyone who was on the call earlier, who's coming back, and those who are able to listen to the replay. I'm here as a source of support for book writing, and I'm just so grateful that you joined me today. So thank you so much. We'll sign off now, and I'll be sending the PDF that I mentioned earlier that has a bunch of reflection questions and some ways to dive deeper into what we covered today, and also some access to those links to signing up for some group program stuff, as well as some of the PDF resources that I mentioned. So
awesome.
All right. Take care. Thank you, Lori. Nice to meet you. And thank you, everyone else.